So in this video, I'm gonna be speed running you through how we made our client $83,000 in 10 days through their info product launch. Here's some proof. As you guys can see, 47,800 on one payment processor and then 15.5k on another. And this is only cash collected, not the revenue. The total revenue was 83k and the cash collected was just below that, I think like 73k, 75k. But yeah, let's get into the video. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm gonna be giving you guys a lot of value. And trust me, you wanna stick through this whole video because what I'm about to share will truly be like super valuable and will unlock probably some like golden nuggets here and there that you could probably use for yourself, your own business, or if you're helping coaches, info sellers scale too, and basically help your clients with this exact process. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. So as you guys can see, this is the overall process we took to basically generate this amount of money. So as you guys can see, how did we go from making or having $0 in the payment processor to $83,000 in the span of 10 days? Well, it's what I like to call a growth and sales process. And I'll explain this just briefly before I get into the in-depth stuff. Your sales process is basically the process you take from day one to launch a date of your product. It could be your info offer, your digital product, a coaching offer. It's basically the process you go through, as I said, from beginning to end. And in that process, you do a certain amount of marketing, you post a certain amount of content, and you gain a certain amount of attention that at the end of the day will allow you to make whatever you make on the launch date. And determined on what you actually do in that growth process, that will basically determine how much you will actually make. So without further ado, let me break down this specific info product launch that we did for our client that generated these results. And trust me guys, you want to stick to the end because you could use this same exact process for your own business if you're running like a coaching info offer, or if you're helping your clients run up offers. You could take this value, implement into their business, and see like tremendous value from it. So as you guys can see, traffic is the number one component before starting any of this, because you need to think of traffic and attention as basically the fuel you pour on the fire. Because if you don't have fuel to pour on the fire, you won't have the fire. And the fire is basically how much you're gonna make. So you guys need to make sure to prioritize traffic, because if you don't have opt-ins or if you don't have like leads into the funnel, you won't make anything at the end of the day. And for this specific launch, what we did, we had two main sources of traffic. The first one was the YouTube and the second one was the Instagram. So let me just break down the YouTube specifically now. We posted, I believe it was 3-4 videos in the span or in between this launch, basically in the process. And the videos were number one, educational videos, number two, vlog videos, and number three, case studies. So all of these three basically pillars are especially on YouTube, are the most important pillars you need to tap into. So starting with the first one is the educational. You need to be able to educate your audience on your specific business model or the skill you're teaching. Because if you are not able to do that, people won't see you as the authority. So making sure you're educating your audience and giving them like pure value is a super important factor in the like growth process of launching a offer. Now moving on to the second, vlogs. Vlogs, like for you as a personal brand or like info seller, or even for your clients' brands, like a vlog is basically them documenting their life, their business, and what they're doing on a day-to-day. Because some videos, like for example like the educational or other like a case study video, you might see only one side of that brand. But when you're able to do vlogs and like you're showing your lifestyle, you're actually documenting what you're doing, the audience now, they're basically able to live your life and see how you live your life through the lens of this camera. And when you're able to do that, you're able to basically build a deeper connection with your following and your audience. And at the end of the day, the deeper people know, like, and trust you, the more they're basically invested in your brand. And when they're invested into you as a personal brand, what you're able to then do is take that attention and monetize off of it and see like great returns from the traffic you're generating. So vlogs are super important, as I mentioned, like you showing your lifestyle, documenting and stuff like that. And finally, we have case study videos. And this surprises me like to this day, because most people think that They can just launch an offer without actually showing proof that it works, which is kind of crazy. If you're, let's say, the buyer or customer and you want to buy something, you want to make sure that this product, service, whatever, has actually worked before and has proof of concept. So this step is super important. And even though you might not get like large amount of like views on these videos, usually the quality of viewership on case study videos and like student testimonials are super good, because the people that are watching are like actually invested into you, into the brand, and they actually want to buy the offer. But before they do that, they just want to see if it actually works. So yeah, that was everything for the YouTube side. And then now going on to Instagram. And honestly, like with Instagram, we didn't do like a lot of selling. Like this client specifically, he doesn't even post short form content. With him, literally, we only did one story sequence where it was basically like a Q&A with the audience. Like he was asking his audience like to ask him questions, and the good ones he'll answer. And then on one specific question, we basically took that question, wrote some copy in the story, and then basically CTA'd the funnel for people to opt in. So yeah, that was everything for the traffic side. And just make sure, put a mental note to prioritize traffic, because as I said in the beginning, if you don't have fuel to pour on the fire, you won't have the fire. So make sure you prioritize your traffic. Now, moving on to the actual funnel. Once you have the attention and traffic, what you want to do is direct people into one funnel. And in this case, we ran a webinar funnel, which is like a live training funnel, a masterclass funnel. It has different names, but at the end of the day, it's like the same thing. Basically, the framework we used on the opt-in page was headline, subheadline, opt-in, so people click on the button to opt-in. And then we had bullet points and fascinations, and then the about section about the client, like who they are, how they started, and how they're doing right now. And then finally, we had case studies and wins. So yeah, basically every single one of these components was in the opt-in page. Now, when people opted in, they got redirected to the thank you page, which is like the second step of the funnel, where we had basically a simple headline thanking them and congratulating them for taking the step. Then we had a VSL, just basically going through, or like first congratulating them, of course, but then going through how this specific business opportunity is probably the biggest right now. And then, of course, just on the VSL, talking through how the actual live training will go and like when it is, and just overall stuff like that. And then, of course, we had two CTAs on the thank you page. One was for people to click on it and then save the event on their Google calendars, which is super important thing, because specifically for this offer, it's like business people, and usually people in business, they typically use Google Calendar to like structure their days, meetings, whatever. And if they're able to see the event on their calendar, they're more likely to actually attend it. So that's one super important note for you guys. And then the second CTA was basically for them to enter a free Telegram group. And the positioning on this was basically that we're going to drop like free resources, like exclusive resources, trainings, and just overall reminders for the training. And we got around like, I think 200-300 people on inside that Telegram group, which is super good. And then of course, on the thank you page, you also want to have case studies like displayed, because proof is probably the most important factor to your offer producing good results. So now we talked through the attention funnel, but now once people are actually opted into your funnel, they basically become a part of your ecosystem, because now you have their name, email, and phone number. They went from just a random viewer and audience to an actual lead in the funnel. And now your goal is basically to take this lead that opted into your funnel and have them go through a specific sales process to later convert them into actual money. So this is what I'd like to call back-end marketing. And this entails your email marketing, which is probably the most important factor, but then also taking advantage of the Telegram group to back-end market these people that have opted in. And I'll start off with Telegram because it's simple. The main things you really just got to worry about here is the actual posts you make. Have them tap into these three pillars basically, which is first, which is the reminder, because throughout this basically funnel, you always want to remind them of when, like what date and what time the live training is. As humans, we naturally forget things. So making sure you like basically drilled that into the lead's head that it's on this date and this time. And then you have value. So your value could be free YouTube videos, free resources, exclusive resources. They just send these people since they're a part of that group. And then finally, you have case studies. And as I mentioned previously, this is basically your proof and proof of concept factor. So just tapping into these 3 quick, simple pillars will help you basically convert these leads inside your Telegram group, or you can do like a WhatsApp group too. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, moving on to email marketing, and hands down, in my opinion, this is probably the most important backend marketing pillar and factor you gotta implement into the sales process, because around 50% of people that actually opt into the funnel will open the email. And you basically, like with a funnel, when someone opts in, that is not the only step they have to do or go through to that last step, which is the launch date. What you need to do and think about always is you want to have a lot of steps in between the start of the launch till like when the actual live launch date is, because the more you're able to present yourself in front of the customer and lead, like the amount of minutes or like hours content they consume before the launch will determine how successful the launch will be and how many people actually show up to the live training in this instance. So with the email marketing, when someone opted in, we basically had a welcome flow automation in place. So once they opted in, automation triggered to the welcome flow, and the welcome flow had 3 emails. And I'll explain the emails just right now. So the first one is basically just thanking them for opting in, presenting this untapped opportunity just shortly, not too long. And then finally, you want to again remind them what date and time the live training is. And then for the second email, you're going basically more in depth on the business opportunity and model for the reader. You basically want to explain why this is such a great opportunity right now, why now is the best time to get in, how untapped it is, and basically present the opportunity as something super big. And then you want to, of course, all in all, do some FOMO. At the end of all these emails, you want to have the reminders, which is also one note. And then finally, the third email, which is the student wins and case studies email. This is where you basically present previous results of students that have gone through the info product, the course, whatever, the coaching, and how good of results they've been able to produce. And basically how this model will make you X per month. And then you want to take the proof that you have and presented into, and then pivot into how this model right now will make you X per month going forward. And then of course at the end, a reminder. And typically with these emails, you want to have 1 day in between. So the first one goes out directly when they're opted in, and then the automation, you basically want to have it so it waits 1 day and then it sends the other one, and then another day and then sends another one. But just make sure once you're nearing the actual launch date that you also want people to receive the daily campaigns, because you don't want to have them go through the automation but then actually not receive the daily campaigns, which is the ones that we're sending with the link to actually join the live training. But yeah, just make sure to also note that down. But as I mentioned, talking over the daily campaigns, after people have gone through this email flow, you basically want to schedule out daily campaigns manually. So not in an actual automation. You just want to schedule them out as a daily campaign. And once you have all the daily campaigns scheduled, then you go into the 72-hour before sequence. So this is basically 72 hours before the launch date or the live training. In this scenario, you want to have a sequence that people go through. And typically with the 72 hour before, on the first 24 hours, you want to send 2 emails. The 48 hours, which is the second day, you want to send out 3 emails. And then 72 hours, which is the day of the actual live training, you want to send out at least 4 emails. And you do this to basically make sure people have understood that on this date and this time, this live training is being hosted. Just make sure to do that. And yeah, with these emails, you could be more like scarcity, urgency, and like you could implement more direct response tactics, because at the end of the day, you want the most amount of people to join the live training. You don't want to soft sell or soft pitch when you're this close to the training. However, you do all of that on the daily campaign. So the daily campaigns, the typical structure, let's say your marketing runway in this scenario is 3 weeks. The first week, you could talk about like the opportunity, why now is such a great time to get in, and just basically present the opportunity as big as possible. Then second week, you can go into more like proof of concept and showcasing student wins, but also simultaneously presenting the opportunity again as something super big and like giving reasons to why this opportunity is super big. And then, as I mentioned, you go into the more like direct response type of emails, reminders, urgency, FOMO. And then you have the did not buy and did not attend sequence. I'll go through this more like specifically soon, but the main thing before the live training is what I mentioned, the 72-hour before. So now moving on to the actual live training. So live training here, as you guys can see, the framework you follow on the training is basically super simple. 3-step framework. Number 1 is you want to have your slide deck presentation prepared, where you basically go through the opportunity, you present like the value and the opportunity in a unique angle. So in this instance, one unique angle we mentioned was, for example, how AI is creating this massive gap, but is also coming after your career if you're stuck with the current model or whatever. So that is how we went through that. So you want to go through the opportunity. Then you want to talk about the story of the person. Scenario, it was the story of our client. So how they started, how many years it took for them to come up, and then now the rosy picture and like the dream state they're in right now. So for example, the cars they drive, the lifestyle they live, how they're living, what they're able to do, how they're able to take care of their loved ones, and just tapping into all those emotional angles that the live attendee that is watching will see and visualize in their brain. So that's super important. Then you want to, once you talk through that, you want to talk about the case studies. So before going even into the presentation and the value, you want to like tell the people on the training that before you even go through the value, you want to present them case studies. So why should they even be listening to you right now? And the case studies is usually how you're able to overcome that objection or that question in the attendee's head. And basically you just present like the most successful wins and case studies you've got. Now, after you do this, you go into the value part of the training. And usually on the value part, what you want to do is construct like a framework. So if it's either you or your client, they probably have a specific framework teaching someone of their business model. And what you want to do now is you want to take this and you want to package it up in a simple way for the attendee to understand, to basically internalize, and then have something that they could actually implement. And it could be something super simple. And in our case, it was basically a 3-step value framework. It was basically how to do client acquisition and real like actual value on how to start doing it right now today. Then it was how to fulfill using AI, and then finally how to make the most amount of money with this like business model. And then after you do this, again, you want to present more case studies, because before the value you presented case studies. Now after the value, you want to basically tell them this student implemented this system and are generating X amount per month. So you always want to have that proof factor and like case study and wins presented for the attendee, because in their head they're always going to be like skeptical and like ask, is this really true, or is this really possible for me? But when you're able to always present the value and then the proof after the value, in their head it's like it becomes a no-brainer. So after you've done that, now you transition into the pitch. And the pitch, you can follow many frameworks, but the typical framework people follow on like a live training funnel, like a webinar funnel, is offer stacking. So the actual product and what you get when you purchase, before you even present the like how much it's going to cost and the investment, you want to offer stack. You want to offer stack and you want to present them each offer inside the overall product, how much the value is. So when you add everything up, let's say it becomes $10,000. But then you of course say, I'm not going to charge you guys $10,000. I'm not even going to charge you half of that. Now you go into the CTA, which is where you present the investment, what they're getting, and when you're actually putting the link in the chat for people to join. So that's the CTA part. Now, after the CTA, some people, they tend to literally end the live training there, which is genuinely not smart at all, because now you've presented the value, you've presented the proof, you've pitched the product. Now it's time for you to give back even more to the viewer. So what do? First of all, before going into the Q&A, you want to FOMO, urgency, and add scarcity to the offer. So for example, you'll say, for this round of enrollments, there's a limited cap space of 20 people. And then what you do is you go into what I like to call the crossroad analogy. So basically, on the live training, you or your client, whoever, you'll basically say this. You'll say to the viewer watching, you're currently standing at a crossroad. You could either stay on the path that you've been on for years and stay stuck and do what the 99% are doing, or you could take the other path, which is you investing today, you taking a shot at yourself, you taking action on the value having been presented today. And basically you telling yourself, today is a day I'm going to change, I'm going to do something that's not ordinary. And by doing this, I'm going to get non-ordinary results, which is what everyone at the end of the day is hoping for. And this is the path that basically gets them the results by investing. So you'll do that analogy and then you'll CTA again. Now, once you CTA again, you want to transition into a Q&A session, because before this live training and before you even started it, you're one of the main selling angles of the training was that you're going to answer all the questions of the viewers. So at the end, you want to keep this at the end because you want to have them go through the whole training, and you don't want to do this, of course, at the beginning, because some people will just come in and then ask their questions and they'll leave. So you want to basically, before you start the training, sell the idea of them staying until the end. So they'll go through the value, case studies, proof, opportunity presented, offer stacking, CTA. And then now what you do is a Q&A session. So you'll answer all of their questions, you'll give them more value, you'll give them a reason to actually stay. And yeah, all in all, you package the webinar super good and you end it off very good. And yeah, you basically use this framework to end the webinar and training off in a good way, where you've as the presenter, or your client as a presenter, given them that value, enough value for them to actually make the investment. And now moving on to this final step, which is basically the whole point of why we ran this sales process, which was to generate an amount of money. And in this scenario for this client, how we were able to basically produce this amount, we opted in, and this was the first time we ever did this. So we opted into having two CTAs. So the first one was basically after we presented all the value and case studies, whatever, the first CTA we made was direct to checkout. And what I mean by that is, when we pitched the first time, we based the CTA, or the link we put in the chat, was basically the direct to checkout link. And this was for people that was they're ready to pay there and then, put their card details, boom, and get access to all the onboarding products, community, all that. We got about 1/4 of the revenue we made came from the direct to checkout. Now the remaining came from the second CTA we made, and that was the book a call CTA. And this, I think, it's probably going to become more popularized. So you guys, this is the first time you probably see it or whatever. Maybe some of you watching this have done it before, but basically you give the attendee two options. So you give them the option of direct checking out, either PIF buying or 2 split pay, or what you do is you pitch them, the second pitch is basically the CTA to book a call. Now, when we did this specifically, I'm not joking with you guys, we got a lot of booked calls, because I think when you're doing direct to checkout, and since this offer was kind of high ticket, just tapping into high ticket, high mid ticket offer price, when you're doing book a call, you'll automatically gonna get more booked calls than if you were to get sales. But when we did this specifically, I think we got around 30 booked calls from that live training alone, which was crazy. And I'll go into this process briefly of the book a call basically. So with the booker call model, what we did before the call, we had the pre-call sequence. So on Calendly, basically you have a pre-call sequence. And this pre-call sequence, it consists of mainly 3 emails, which is, again, following the model of presenting the opportunity. First of all, just thank them for booking a call, but then just briefly tap into the opportunity. Then the second email, you present case studies, and then finally is basically just reminders for their call. And then what you also want to do is the closer that's going to take the call, you want them to reach out to the lead that booked the call on like WhatsApp, because you want the closer beforehand to get in contact, so that automatically increases the show up rate before the call. And then of course you have the call, and in this video I don't want to go specifically into the framework of the sales call, but the closer did his thing, and it was a super good closer, by the way. But yeah, and then all the calls of course either ended in a close, or some people, and this is also one note you want to make probably for the longevity of your business or your client businesses, some people that book a call, you could try to aggressively sell them and aggressively get them like in their emotional state and get them to basically spend all the money they have left into the product. Or you could go basically the more ethical way of selling, which is if the guy actually doesn't have enough money, or they're in a situation that probably will hurt them if they invest today, we even told our closer, and then the closer, like our closer for this specific launch, he already knew it for beforehand. And that was basically to not aggressively sell a guy if he sees that this is actually not the right fit for them. And this is super, super important for you as the guy selling the info for the longevity of your business, or even if you're running a sales process and launch process for your own clients. Because when you're able to do this, you or your client, whatever, you put yourself like above every other info seller and like a service provider, because you're not hungry for money. And when you're not hungry and when you're not basically desperate for money, you automatically attract more of it. Because if you're always needy and you want like every single dollar of whatever lead, and doesn't matter whatever the quality of the lead, whenever you do that, like subconsciously you're needy and you want their money. But for these leads, as I mentioned, some people we basically said, okay, got you, bro, like just off this call alone, we think this is not even a good fit for us, which is why instead of going through the whole pitch and whatever, I'm gonna redirect you to watch this guy's YouTube videos. And when you do this, it's like from the customer's angle, they already got the trust to book a call and whatever and speak with a team member of the client's team. But when you're able to do this, the respect of that lead in their eyes like just went from here to here, because now they're thinking, okay, these guys are not like, oh, give me your money, like whatever amount you have right now, just give it and then we'll give you access. No, it's like you basically set a strict rule that if the lead has less than this amount, you will actually tell them that this is not a good fit for them or for us. And instead of hard selling or trying to get them to scrap however much they have left in their bank or whatever to invest, what you do is you redirect them to the free YouTube. You tell them, go watch the free YouTube, implement this for a month or 2, and then we can circle back on another call, and hopefully at that point you have the amount to invest. And then that way that selling becomes more ethical, and you're not like just aggressively trying to sell every single one. Because at the end of the day, if someone doesn't have the full amount to pay, you could of course do split pays and whatnot, which we did in this offer. But we had said that if someone has $1,000 and less, we would automatically basically tell them no, direct them to the free YouTube as well. But then if they had over 1,000, we could do either 2 split pay or a manual split pay, where they invested the 1,000 and then month 2 they pay the other half, and so on and so forth. But yeah, hope you guys understood that. And then also, I didn't discuss this, but basically you want to have a super simple and streamlined onboarding process for the customers. So either if people bought from the live training, direct checkout, they went into this onboarding sequence, which is basically they receive the welcome email and then they receive Discord access, and then product access, which is basically the course hosting platform. They get access to that. And then on the call, of course, the closer could manually also onboard these people and basically get them started way sooner. But automatically, we had set up like automations. If someone bought, it would send out like the welcome email automatically, and then also the Discord and product access emails. So all of this was basically automated. So you guys might be wondering, is this everything we did to make $83,000 in 10 days? No, because as I mentioned here, it was 10 days. And this, what was it? Only 1 day, technically. The live training, the checkout. Of course, the booked calls, from the live training, we booked like 2-3 days, fully booked calendars ahead. But this was not the only thing we did. So to get basically more booked calls onto the closers calendars, we had a setter, and we created a CRM inside Close, which was basically for the setter to dial every single lead. And how we divided this was basically we prioritized the did not buy attendees. So the did not buy was basically the attendees on the live training that attended, but they did not buy. So the setter, we basically filtered all of these leads into the CRM, and he called them and prioritized these leads. So first of all, we had them go to a sequence, like simultaneously, we had them go to a sequence and had the setter basically dial them. So as I mentioned right here before, the did not buy and did not attend sequence, which is right here. So we had them go through an email sequence. At the same time the setter dialed, he did at least 100 dials a day. But for your setter or your clients, whoever, you could have a breathing room from, for example, let's say 100 dials a day to, let's say, 300. It depends really on the setter's schedule, how much they're able to dial. But if they have nothing to do or no other offer they're on, they could dial as many as they can in a day. So basically, we prioritized these leads, and we had the setter dial the did not buy attendees and had them book a call with the closer that, of course, went through this process. And then finally, we had the registrants that did not attend. And these people are basically everyone that basically they registered and they opted in, but they never actually showed up to the live training. So the setter dialed them, and of course, with these leads, it was harder for them to pick up because they didn't basically expect it. Because what they technically only did was opt in and then maybe go through, like, of course, the welcome flow and the daily campaigns. But you still want to call these people because at the end of the day, they showed some type of intent to show up to the live training, but yeah, just basically them opting in showed some type of intent of them being interested in this. So you still want to call them, but you want to prioritize, as I mentioned, the people that actually showed up to the live training. And what you could also do is, and make sure to note this down because it's super valuable, this is not actually like the main priority list. The main priority list, and you as the service provider or whatever client, if you have a team, on the live training, if you have one person from your team, basically note down the most engaged attendees. So the people that are commenting on the side of the webinar and training, basically note down every single one's name. And once you feed the CRM, the leads that attended, you want to prioritize them over everyone else that maybe attended, but they didn't type in the chat or they didn't stay until the end. So prioritize the leads that basically engaged the most and also that stayed until the end. Because the people that stayed until the end are more likely to have heard of the offer, the value, and everything. But yeah, that was basically everything for this video, all the way from traffic, attention, to getting people into a funnel, to opt-in, basically back-end marketing for them to actually show up to the live webinar and training, the actual process after the live training to maximize the amount you make, of course, and then the onboarding sequence, super simple, and basically the setters framework. And yeah, this was basically everything we did to produce $83,000 in 10 days for our client. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, just speed running this info product launch that we did for our client. And yeah, we're probably going to do more of these videos on our channel because this is, I think, the first one now that we're just sitting down presenting the action process we took to generate this amount for our client on a launch. And yeah, because we're doing more launches all the time with clients, with students, whatever, even for ourselves. And yeah, I think it would probably help you guys a lot watching this. If you see the process, maybe you can implement it into your own business, as I said, or you take it and implement for your clients' businesses. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's definitely more value to come. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one.